This is Lois Whaley for Women Today and Yesterday. My guest today, a very special guest, is Dr. Geneva Murray, who is the director of the Ohio University Women's Center. Welcome, Geneva.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, you haven't been on this job very long, actually, have you?
No, I started in October, so I've been here, I guess, close to 5 months now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I moved here from Wisconsin, so I tell people I moved here for the warmer climate.
Well, lately we've been having warm days followed by snow days.
Yeah, it's been a bit confusing. So.
Yes. Well, it's confusing to us, too. I don't know that I've ever experienced a winter quite like it.
Well, I certainly haven't.
Are you originally from Wisconsin?
No, I'm originally from Oklahoma. I was born and raised in Oklahoma City, and then I did my undergraduate in Texas, my master's in Washington, D.C., and then I moved to England for my Ph.D., and then did some postdoc study in the Netherlands before moving to Wisconsin, and now on to Ohio.
Yes. It's kept you rather busy, I imagine.
I always tell people that I have very itchy feet, so I like to stay moving.
Oh, well, let's hope you don't move too fast from Athens.
I don't think I will, no.
Well,
yeah.
That's very good. Where were you in England?
I was in York, at the University of York.
Okay.
It's about 2 hours north of London by train. Yeah, a very nice little small town. Everyone always thinks when I say I lived in England that I lived in London, and I lived in a much, much smaller town. That was really lovely. Yeah.
And near York itself.
No, in York.
In York
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
But of course it's important religiously. There's the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Archbishop of York.
We have the York Minster, actually. So the York Minster, the entire time that I was there, it was being remodeled. They were restoring it, I should say.
Right.
And they've just now opened it up again
My
with all of
goodness.
the restoration done. So I want to go back and see it.
Right.
Without all the scaffolding.
Well, we saw York briefly when we were in England in 1957.
Okay.
It's a long, long time ago. My husband was a student for a year at Oxford.
Oh, lovely.
And I was teaching U.S. servicemen because there were quite a few in England.
Yeah.
And I imagine there still are some, but a lot of them were going home at the time because they were in the artillery and people who were working on shooting down planes if any should happen to come over, which of course, luckily they didn't in 1957. But they were just going to missiles at the time. And it was an interesting year. And then we were back in London, actually, itself, twice. Once in the southeast, not too far from Greenwich.
Okay.
And our children were by then we had kids, and they were in school nearby. And then in 1983, after our empty nest occurred, kids were all in college or something, in a way. We were in southeast London, near Kew.
Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful Kew Gardens nearby. So,
Oh, nice.
altogether, I've had quite a long experience of England and really appreciated it very much. Enjoyed it a lot.
Wonderful.
Well, if you were working on a doctorate, you must have been for several years there.
I was there for 3.5 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very substantial time.
It was enjoyable. It really was. I would have loved to have stayed, but alas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Duty calls, as they say, and so anyway.
Or the visa office, in my case.
Yes, indeed. Oklahoma City reminds me that I have trying to think, how is she related? I guess she's a distant cousin, but I've been in touch with her because of genealogy. She was one of the family genealogists, is still, although, well, she's in her 90s now. But she lived in Oklahoma City for years and years and years and years. I remember, in fact, after the terrible attack there in the 90s, she sort of fell out of genealogy and into doing other things.
Okay.
But, well, you may have remembered that time
What?
when the
Oklahoma
bombing
yeah.
occurred in Oklahoma City. You
Yeah.
probably were a youngster then.
Yeah, I was in 5th grade, and
5th grade.
we felt the ground shake, and the windows at my brother's school broke.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right, well, that was really scary, and of course that was not as big as 9/11, but a very substantial, and of course a homegrown terrorist in
Yeah.
that case, an American serviceman. But anyway, yeah, you've been pretty peripatetic, but now you're here, and we need to talk a little bit about the upcoming event.
Oh, I would love that very much. Yeah.
Yes. Well, you have a poster here, I see,
Yeah.
for it.
So-
And we have a poster which I think we can show. Right. There it is. Yeah. So when is the event?
So the event is on March 13th, which is a Sunday, and it lasts from 2 to 6, and it's a celebration of the International Women's Day.
International Women's Day, and of course, March has become International Women's Month, and
It's Women's History Month, and so
Yes.
yeah. So the Women's Center at Ohio University has quite a few different programs going on to celebrate the month, and then we also have the International Women's Day Festival, which you have served on the planning committee for how many years
yes,
now?
well, ever since it started, which is I think was in 2007
Yeah.
or 2008. So it's been quite a long time, and we've had some very nice international women's festivals in the past, and looking forward to this year's one as well.
I'm excited to be a part of it. We actually had record-breaking numbers of people who had applied to participate as performers, and then also for tables for research. And so we have a very full schedule for the day, and lots of really wonderful acts.
Right. Well, and you say it's Sunday afternoon, which is a convenient time for people to come out. And
Absolutely, and from 2 to 5 o'clock. So the first, well, more than the first part of the program, but from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. All of the performances have been confirmed as child-friendly. So it'll be a really nice afternoon out with family as well.
yes.
Yeah.
And I know there's always like a table in the back where children can color and do things like that.
Right,
Yeah.
there's a child play area as well that's accessible with parental supervision, of course. So you'll have to stay with your children, but you can come and take part in the children's activities as well. And there will be some face painting this year. So
Yes. Well, our guest who was just on is also a member of the committee, and she's going to be involved with the face painting.
which I'm very excited about. So I plan on getting my face painted after the fashion show. So there is a fashion show component, and I'm going to dress up like a suffragist as part of my fashion show.
Wonderful.
And I've got my large banner that says, Mr. President, what will you do for women's suffrage? Which is taken from the National Women's Party's call to Woodrow Wilson. And so after the fashion show, and I'm not a suffragist anymore, I'm going to get my face painted.
Oh,
I just haven't decided what country flag I want. So.
yes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we've got several hundred to choose from, apparently.
Apparently so. So, yeah.
And whether people will choose a place where they've been, perhaps, or whatever, might be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, there will be a number of different performances from 2 o'clock till 5. And people do come in and out.
Well, the whole day's program lasts from 2 to 6, but from 2 to
Yes.
5 is the confirmed child-friendly performances.
I see.
Right, and so from 5 to 6, we do have performances that will be child-friendly, but we also have some that might have some stronger language in it. So we have quite a few people who will be reading original poems. We have some who are going to be singing inspirational songs. I'm really looking forward to the dancing.
Yes.
Because I've had a chance to peek at the Martin Luther King Jr. Festival. I got to see one of the student groups dancing, and they were fantastic. So I'm excited to see.
And they're going to be, again, at our festival.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's marvelous. We have so many talented women here, men too, for that
Right.
matter, but most of the performers will be women.
Right, but
Right.
you know, the great thing about the festival is it's an opportunity for everyone, regardless of their gender, to really talk about how far we've come for women and then how much further we can go. So we do have men who are participating in the festival as performers, and we're very excited that they're able to come with us as allies as we support women in our fight for gender parity.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Well, it's one of those fights that we keep thinking maybe we will declare victory. However, it's a very continuing battle. I have here, if I can reach it. Let's see if I can reach it without losing my. This is from 2000, from the year 2000. Women's Rights Convention, the 150th anniversary, because the first one in Ohio was actually, there's some question. There are some people in Massachusetts who insist that they were the second after Seneca Falls. But we think that maybe we were the second in Salem, Ohio, in the year 1850. So this is my
Yeah,
my bag from those days. The women have sort of faded here, you see, because I've had to wash my bag a number of times.
Yeah.
But Ohio has had definitely people interested in women's suffrage and women's rights. And I think especially of someone that I believe I spoke about the first time that we had the International Women's Day event. And she was from this area of Ohio, from a pioneer family in Marietta. And she was one of those girls who loved to climb trees. And when her father was away, her father had a shop that made barrels. And when she was old enough and interested in doing something different, she went into the shop when it was not full of workmen and made a barrel. And her father, instead of saying, wow, said, you better go help your mom wash the dishes or something like that, That didn't stop her. She just continued on in her ways. Her name was Frances Dana Gage.
Okay.
And Gage was her married name. She was of the Barker family, actually. But she went on and she finally became the mother of 8 children, 2 girls and 6 boys. And interestingly, she had the girls first, which turned out to be quite useful because then they were able to help take care of the following boy brothers that they had. And she was able to do some writing. She wrote a column called Aunt Fanny's Column for a newspaper in the 1840s and so on. And she lived very close to here. and like I say, her family was from Marietta, but she lived in McConnellsville, which is just up the river from Marietta, and she was quite a gal. She was the chairman at the meeting in Akron in 1851, where Sojourner Truth spoke, that her famous
Ain't I a Woman?
Yeah, Ain't I a Woman? Although some people say she didn't actually say Ain't I a Woman?
It's debated, but that was the thing, right? Is that the speech wasn't written down in advance.
No.
People just went home and wrote what they remembered from it because it
Right.
was such a powerful speech.
Yes.
So, you know, in a way, it's unfortunate that we don't know exactly what she said,
Right.
but it's amazing that the power and message that she had has been communicated for all these years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Frances Dana Gage also spoke in nearby Chester Hill, which is just over the border from Athens County, which was there were a lot of members of the Society of Friends there in those days, and she's actually spoke in a big barn to about 300 people. I mean, they sort of cleared things out of the barn, you know, and I guess most of the hay was upstairs anyway or whatever. I suppose they put the poor cows out in the cold for a while, and she spoke to about 300 people, they say, there
Wow.
in Chester Hill. And during the Civil War, she helped freed slaves down south in one of the islands off the southern U.S. coast. And it was her write-up, which is probably the best known one, because it came in the history of women's suffrage books. You know, it was written up for that. So we can claim a famous woman for women's rights who was right here, and I think maybe her grandparents even moved to Athens. There's some question about that.
Well, that's lovely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that there are many other women that we won't ever know, right, who are
Right.
doing
Yeah.
lots of wonderful work to promote women's rights.
Yes, and someone like Sojourner Truth, most people think that she was a Southern slave, but she wasn't. She was a Northern slave. She was born and raised in New York State, and Dutch was her first language because she lived with Dutch-speaking people on the Hudson River.
Okay.
And
I did not know that.
Yeah, you know, it was a big surprise to me too to discover that she was actually from near New Paltz, which is a place where a lot of French Huguenot people also, well, they founded that town, and it was near there that she was born and raised, Sojourner Truth, and wound up in Michigan eventually. But yeah, there are a lot of people in women's history for sure.
Absolutely.
What particular things have you researched?
Sure. Well, when I was working on my master's in Washington, D.C., I had the fortune of being the education coordinator for a women's history museum there called the Sewell Belmont House Museum. And that's home to the National Women's Party, which is, of course, Alice Paul, her organization, the splinter suffrage group. So I've done quite a bit in terms of looking at suffrage and helped develop some of the tours that we were offering when I was there. And then when I was, a lot of my other work when I was in D.C. was about promoting eating disorder awareness. So I was the public policy assistant for the Eating Disorders Coalition for Research, Policy, and Action. So I've done quite a bit in terms of thinking about body positivity and what we can do to promote eating disorder recovery. And then my passion, though, when I was doing my PhD is I study roller derby. Do you know about roller derby?
Are we talking roller skates?
Yes, so roller derby is a full contact sport on roller skates.
Oh.
Yeah, so a lot of people know it from maybe, the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Ah, yes.
In this grandiose kind of play, if you will. But roller derby was revitalized primarily as an all-female sport in 2001.
Oh.
Started in Austin, Texas, and now it's grown all over the world. So I used to play roller derby in England, and I played for a bit in the Netherlands, and then helped with the coaching in Utrecht. But then the night before my PhD defense, I had an accident and I hurt
dear.
my back.
Oh,
so
dear.
I'm not allowed to play anymore because I now have 2 slip discs.
Oh, heavens. Well, contact sport,
It was fantastic. I would not change it for anything. So as much as my back hurts, I wouldn't trade it at all. I think that it's so important that we empower women to play sport and that they
Yes.
realize that their bodies have the same kind of physical possibilities that men have. And
Yes.
yeah, roller skates are the great equalizer. So
Yes. Well, I remember my skates very fondly. Of course, in the day when I had roller skates back in second grade, which was in the late 1930s, not many people were wearing tennis shoes, as we used to call them, in those days. Most children wore hard shoes to school, and the skates were put on with a key,
Yeah.
you had to tighten it around the sole
yeah.
of your shoes. And where we were living at the time in Nevada, there weren't that many sidewalks, plus which the little town, silver mining town called Tonopah, actually it was the county seat of Nye County, but it was built between 2 large mountains. And so there, you had to find a level spot that had a hard surface. And as it turned out, the WPA office in Tonopah had a very nice, large, I don't know, maybe from here to the front door of Channel 9 studio, that was a place where kids congregated with their skates.
That's good.
Way back when.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roller skates were a lot of fun.
Yeah, it still is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Although sometimes it's difficult to find a place that you can skate indoors now. So, there's a great
Yes.
Athens roller derby team
Yes.
in Athens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But they wind up playing a lot of their games a bit out of Athens just for lack of being able to have a wide enough place for the track. So, yeah. But I'm looking forward to going and seeing them play this summer. So, yeah.
Where is it? Is it located right in the town of Athens?
There's Athens roller derby. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess, is it at the same place where they have the bowling? The bowling?
To be honest, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
I'm not allowed to go to roller derby practices because I would want to play.
That's right.
And therein lies the problem with my back. So
Yes. You've got to forego that, which is too bad. But
yeah. Yeah, but that's what I'm really interested in. I'm really interested in women's sport and how women's sport can be used to change people's perceptions about
Yes,
women.
yes.
And so my research, when I was doing my doctoral research, I focused on spectators and how spectators interpreted the women who were performing on roller skates. So what did they think when they saw women doing these heavy, high contact hits with each other? And in particular, what happened when they saw women playing against men, right? So when we have full contact sport where men and women are playing against each other, what does that mean in terms of how we can change people's ideas about women's gender?
Right. Well, tell me more about how it actually works. I mean, there must be some rules. I mean, must you hit someone with your shoulder or?
You can hit people with your shoulder or with your hip and also
Okay.
with your butt. So there are legal target zones.
Okay.
And then there are legal zones for hitting. So for example, I couldn't elbow someone. And that's what a lot of people think of when they think of roller derby from the 1980s is people elbowing or even clotheslining, right? Where you stick out your arm and the people running against it. And those things aren't legal in roller derby nowadays.
No, I see.
Right. So there's a very strict code of conduct in terms of how you can hit someone and where you can hit them. So you can't hit people, in their back or smash them in the head or anything like that.
Oh,
so,
I see. Do you have to wear helmets?
Yes. Yes.
Ah, okay.
Protective gear is very important. So everyone wears wrist guards, elbow guards, knee pads, and your helmet. And then you also have a gum shield or what do they call it in the States? A mouth guard.
Mouth guard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, interesting. I must say, all of my contact with roller skates are long, long ago. And I don't know that I've ever actually seen, I tell you what I've seen more of is ice skating.
Ice skating's a beautiful sport.
It's, it's something that my granddaughter is very interested in ice skating because her father is Dutch. And the Dutch, of course, the canals in Holland have been traditionally the place where the Dutch have gone in the winter.
I missed, when I first moved to the Netherlands, it was winter. There was snow everywhere on the ground, and the canals had frozen, because in Utrecht we've got these beautiful canals, and it's not very far away from Amsterdam, and it was the only time I was there when the canals froze, and I missed it.
Oh,
I was
dear.
so exhausted from my bus drive. I was on a bus for way too many hours, going from London to Utrecht, and I fell asleep, and I missed my one opportunity of ice skating on the canals. So,
You mean the weather turned warm and?
well, it got nice, or at least it got nice enough to where you shouldn't really be skating on the canals.
I see. Well, too bad.
Yeah.
Too bad. Yes, my granddaughter is a sophomore in high school, but she's been ice skating now for years and years with her dad, and it's really a kind of a practice thing. I used to see her occasionally, dancing around and twirling around. I wonder what she's doing, And one day her mother said, well, she's practicing her ice skating, actually, on the land, when there wasn't any ice around to actually do the skating on.
That's probably safer, though, right? You're building some muscle memory as you're trying to twirl.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and so many more girls now, as you point out, are involved with sport. Many more than when I was young.
I'm sure.
Many more, and it's
And
really
different
good.
kind of sports as
Yes,
well.
right.
Right. And I mean, we still have these gender differences when it comes to sport in terms of what women versus men are allowed to do or boys versus girls, right? So if we think about ice hockey, for example, there are specific gender differences where women aren't allowed, or girls aren't allowed to do the full body checks that we see in men's hockey. Right. And so the question is always kind of why.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, there's, in addition to ice hockey, there's land hockey,
Right.
which I think is pretty prevalent here at OU, if I'm not mistaken. I may be mistaken on that, or maybe that was some years ago when there was a particularly important. I know they had to, after Title IX, they had to make changes, and of course it really ticked the men off because they thought football is going to go, when you have 110 young men out for football, and of course teams only have 11 or something like that, but all these young men come out for the sport, and then along comes Title IX, and they say, gee, how are we ever going to balance 110 men with, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 women's sports, which have fewer people involved.
Right. And I mean, there's been the debate of what counts as a sport, right?
Yeah.
And so the courts a while ago said that cheerleading, for example, isn't a sport, whereas I think cheerleading is very much a sport. You don't want that to be the only thing that's offered to women, but when you talk about the physicality and the strength that you have to build in order to be able to practice,
Right, and do the tricks that they do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It requires a great deal of physical
Absolutely.
effort. So.
But there's been lots of new sports that have been developed to try to get people interested in physical activity where maybe they weren't before. So are you a fan of the Harry Potter books?
Yes.
So you know the game Quidditch?
Yes.
So there have been Muggle versions of Quidditch created. And one of the ways in which they try to support gender equity within Quidditch is they created something called Title 9 3/4. Which is fantastic.
sort of like that railroad
exactly.
place.
Exactly. But then also a nice twist off of Title IX. So, so the way they get away with not flying is they run with a broom in between their legs. Yeah. And there are Quidditch games around the nation now.
Well, that's all news to me, and I learn something every day.
Exactly.
That's for sure. Well, we should mention again for anyone who tuned in and turned on our show that March 13th, Sunday afternoon, from 2 to 6 at Baker Center Ballroom, we're going to be having the Women's Day Festival.
Right. Right. Every year we have the International Women's Day Festival as a way for us to celebrate International Women's Day, which occurs every year on March 8th.
Yes.
So this is a nice way to kind of follow up and to find out about current research that's going on. We'll have research tables with people presenting their works on gender issues. We have vendors, people who are going to be selling things, face painting, and then of course the performances throughout the day as well with singing and dancing and poetry and all sorts of wonderfulness.
Right, research, people talking about their research.
Right.
I have been involved each time briefly, usually toward the beginning of the program. When there are fewer people there, we sort of wait a little bit, but we can't wait. We have so many people tightly scheduled this time.
We are starting promptly at 2.
2 o'clock.
And this is unfortunately the first year that we actually haven't been able to accept all of the requests for participation.
Yes.
And it's because we've had record-breaking numbers, which I think is a testament to the quality of the International Women's Day Festival in years past and the hard work that the committee members and then also, the woman who was the director of the Women's Center prior to me, Suzanne Dietzel, it's a great testament to the hard work that you all have put in because it's at a level where we are breaking records with the numbers of people who are wanting to participate. And we hope that even if they aren't performing or presenting or whatever else, that they'll come out and help us as we celebrate. Yes,
and enjoy what other folks are doing and get a chance to just see it. That's right. Well, Dr. Susanna Dietzel was particularly interested in International Women's Day because it was begun in her home country of Germany.
Right.
And so that was a thing that particularly helped create her interest and maintain it. And I know we have this beautiful poster which is up and around campus and around town and so on, and so everyone will have a chance to see that it is March 13th, Sunday afternoon at Baker Center Ballroom, which is on the 4th floor, of course.
And there's been a couple new things this year. So our poster was actually designed by a student, which normally happens, but this year we opened it up opened it up across campus as a competition. And so we had submissions from lots of different areas on campus and had a very
Nice.
difficult decision to make once again, which
Right,
seems to be a
right.
theme with the
Yes.
festival. And so our poster was actually designed by Miguel.
Yes.
So that's wonderful. And then we also had open auditions for our MCs this year.
Oh,
Yeah, and so there were several days where people were coming into the Women's Center and auditioning. And again, we had, well, it was just amazing. As someone new to Ohio University, or to Ohio generally, being able to see the quality of students that we have at Ohio University,
yes.
the dedicated alumna, and the community members that are very supportive of the programming that we do.
Right.
It was a great way for me to be introduced to the festival because people were coming in and we asked them to give a 5-minute talk about what International Women's Day meant to them. And I was just overwhelmed by the responses. People who were talking about growing up with their mother, going to university, and showing them, how, a roadmap for education. People talking about how International Women's Day is not just for us to celebrate, but it's a time for us to demand action, for us to really think about what gender equity means and how we can achieve it. And we wound up selecting 2 MCs for the main program and then also an MC for the fashion show. But that was very, very tough to make a decision. We had so many wonderful, wonderful people come in.
Right. And you mentioned when we talk about International Women's Day, one of the really nice things about the event is the participation by a number of international women who are, many of them are students here at Ohio University. And so the fashion show will include a number of costumes. I guess we shouldn't say costumes.
No, the fashion show will be an opportunity for people to see traditional dress from different cultures around the world. But one thing that's really important for us to remember is that the United States is also part of the world. And so when we think about International Women's Day, we're thinking about the international issues, but then also how the United States fits within that context.
Right.
Which is why I'm dressing up as a suffragist, mostly because my clothes aren't nearly as cool as suffragist clothes were. So a bit of it is to pay homage to our history and some of the more traditional outfits that have been worn over time. Yeah.
Well, and I believe one of the other features that we always have had has been almost continuous showing of women from around the world, either famous women or well-known women, or women from the United States. And one of the things, since I'm going to be talking briefly about Ohio's first ladies, the women, 7 women who were wives of 7 of the U.S. presidents who were from Ohio. The women themselves were from Ohio. You see different kinds of fashion over the years because most of the women, first ladies, 5 of the 7 were from the 19th century. So, of course, they would be wearing things that were in style in their own time, obviously. And we do have here in Ohio actually a national park, which is located in Canton, Ohio, near the home of Mrs. McKinley. Her husband was president from 1896 to 1901 when he was unfortunately assassinated. He was one of the presidents who was assassinated. But her home is very close there in Canton, and they have a library there that was set up by another one of the first ladies, not a one from Ohio, but someone else who was very interested in books. And the library that she gathered together is a part of that national park
Lovely.
in Canton itself.
Yeah.
And so we have, and this is the 100th anniversary of the national parks. You know, you don't think of something like a First Lady's exhibit or museum or whatever as a park, but there are a great variety of parks.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is one of them in Ohio, and a very special one
Lovely.
from Ohio. So I'm sure the fashion show is scheduled during the 2 to 5 time.
Right. So 2 to 5 are confirmed family-friendly hours, and then the show will continue on until 6 o'clock. You know, something about the fashion show that I think is really interesting is that I think typically when we hear fashion, we think of it being a bit trivial, right? But what's really important for us to think about when it comes to the fashion show is that when we look at traditional clothing from around the world, or when we think about historically how clothing has changed for women here in the United States, it signifies a lot about women's standing in society, or beauty norms, and what is privileged.
I chuckle. I really shouldn't chuckle, but I recently received a newsletter from a museum in which the woman described high mourning, in mourning, M-O-U-R-N, in the Victorian age.
Oh.
And it was astounding. I mean, you know, women were expected to wear a black veil, which fell to their knees. I mean, it was a full around veil. It was in their back and in their front, fell to their knees. For, the first 3 months they weren't supposed to go outside at all, or something like that. Then the next 6 months they were supposed to go out with this thing. Of course, they were wearing all black, including black underwear, if you can imagine. And at the end, after this big description of what women were expected to wear for mourning for a year, basically, it got a little, you know, after 6 months you could wear a white ruff or something like that, you know. Then it said that as far as the men were concerned, if the widowers were expected to wear a black armband for a month.
Wow.
And then find another wife. Oh dear. I thought, wow, how sexist can you get?
Yeah.
I suppose maybe they followed the tradition of Queen Victoria. You know, she was the one who instituted the white gown for wedding, for the wedding. And then she was such a sorrowful widow for many years. And I suppose she was the one who initiated this all black, including the underwear tradition in the 19th century. So
that's fascinating.
And then one of the other problems with women, I can remember my grandmother always wore a corset because in her day, girls were expected to start wearing corsets at about, puberty, you know, 14 or 15, something like that. And the corset was, you know, a full, covered the full torso. Plus, the waist itself was often very, very cinched, made into, so that women had these tiny waists, which were really not very good for your innards.
No. Yeah.
So.
And they wonder why women used to have fainting couches.
Yes.
But, you know, that's coming back. There are people who are doing waist training with corsets.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to try to get very, very small waists.
Oh, dear.
But then there's also other mechanisms that people use nowadays. So in some ways, we haven't really gotten rid of stuff. We've just transformed it. So now there's Spanx, right? Everyone's supposed to wear Spanx.
Well, it's part of this around and around you go, and where you stop, nobody knows. I wanted to show you something. You were speaking about the women. I've got a picture in here. I didn't have us take a photo of it because was not really large enough, but it is from the, now if I can only find it, it's from 1977 when they had the international, after the first International Women's Year, which was in 1975, they had, in 77, they had women came from all over, and they had 56 state and territorial meetings. I was very involved with the one from Ohio. But this shows the November 1977 end to International Women's Year celebration. And well, you see some people who are well known. There's the lady who wrote
Betty Friedan,
Betty Friedan,
The Feminine Mystique.
The Feminine Mystique, and here's Bella Abzug.
I love her and her hats.
She had so many hats. She was
did.
she was a member of the U.S. Congress from New York State, and they have these three women here were the ones who brought the torch the last mile. They you know, just like the Olympic.
Right.
They carried a torch from Seneca Falls, New York, where the first women's meeting was held in 1848, all the way to Texas,
Wow.
where the national meeting was held in Houston. And this woman here, these three women carried the torch the last mile.
Okay.
So they are part of the, you see all the flags and
Yeah.
so on. They're part of the entrance to the meeting itself. But this woman is from Ohio.
Okay.
She lives in Columbus.
Oh.
And Dr. Catherine Jellison, whom I'm sure you've met from history department, happened to see this woman on the plane one time when she was coming into Columbus. And she told her about this picture, that the picture was in this Women's America book, Refocusing the Past. And she did not realize, this woman did not realize that this picture was, you know, really famous and
Lovely.
appeared in like books like this, you know.
How nice.
But she was an Ohio woman, and I don't know whether they give her name here or not, but yes. Peggy Cokernut from Columbus. That's this lady.
Lovely.
Yeah. So we had, that was something that I was involved with, as I mentioned, and this was the book that we had, which was published the previous year. It was published in 1976, the year after the international meeting in Mexico City, which was the first international women's meeting. But I got this, as you can see, it's pretty battered. I've used it over the years. It was sent to me by the woman who set up the, she was with the State Department, because the State Department was in charge of these because of the connection with Mexico City and the international connection.
Lovely.
And there are, it was to serve as a guide, so to speak. These pictures are of members of the National Commission, which did the planning for the Women's Day event. We had it in Columbus in June of 1977.
Yeah.
And like I say, I was on the Ohio committee. So, and we had a very interesting experience with it, which was that, the state and territorial meetings all got a number of delegates to go to Houston. And that was part of the first day's event. It was a weekend, actually, event in June here. And they were having them all over the country. I think there were like 12 that same day.
Wow.
But some, there were only a couple on certain weekends, and they went all during that summer of 1977. But the conservative women were very well organized in Ohio, and we had buses. We had money for buses, and people could bring buses, loads of people in. Anyone who was 18 years old, man or woman, could vote for delegates. So that the Ohio delegation wound up with 45 conservative women who were members of either Ohio Right to Life or Eagle Forum. And there were 11 women who were, many of them were members of the National Organization for Women, now also organized and got a lot of people there and got people to vote and so on. But it was quite interesting because a lot of these conservative ladies just went home after the first day. And the second day, there was a straw poll on a number of female issues. And all of those passed overwhelmingly. So you could tell that there was a difference between the people who voted and the people who stayed. Even the two most contentious issues were passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, which was still very much on the horizon in those days in 1977, and choice on abortion. Even those two passed by 2/3.
Wow.
In the straw poll that was done.
Yeah.
And some of the others, like whether older women should be supported or, whether there should be equal pay, for equal work and that sort of thing. Many of those passed overwhelmingly.
Wow.
So it was a very interesting event, believe me. And
lovely.
one of the women who was also on the committee with me from Athens, who was working with Ohio University Public Relations. She was quite a young woman at the time, of course, and I myself was over 40 by then. But she was among those who went to Houston, and she brought me back a T-shirt. Not this one, obviously, but this was one of the ones with the women's symbol on it, and so on.
That's wonderful.
So it was one of the things I remember best in a long, long time of volunteering in this country.
That's wonderful.
I wanted to point one other thing out from Remember the Ladies, and that is this picture about women's suffrage. You mentioned that you're going to be dressed as a suffragist in the event on March 13th in the afternoon.
Yes.
The first part, with your sign and so on.
My banner, yeah.
Your banner. And this is women's suffrage headquarters, Men of Ohio. In 1912, there was an effort to pass the women's vote in Ohio. And this picture was taken at that time. And you see this bee here?
Yes.
That identifies Florence Allen. In 1912, she was working for women's suffrage. But she became a lawyer, and she was the first woman judge in Cleveland area, in the Cleveland area. In 1920, when women's suffrage passed, she had this job, and she had been working for years for women's suffrage.
Yeah.
So she had women of both parties and so on all across Ohio who knew her and supported her. And she was first elected judge in Cleveland itself, right after the passage of women's suffrage. In 1920, she became a judge
That's wonderful.
in Cleveland. 2 years later, she ran for the Ohio Supreme Court and was elected, once again,
Wow.
because she had all these supporters from around the state. And then she became the first woman on the federal bench in 1934.
Wow.
So that's who this woman is as a young woman. But she was
That's wonderful.
from Ohio, and she was born in Utah, actually, because her father was living there at the time. Her family was, but both her parents had Northeast Ohio and Eastern Pennsylvania roots. And so she went back to Ohio,
Wow.
later and did this kind of work.
That's lovely.
So that's Florence Allen, and she was one of the people that I mentioned. Frances Dana Gage, as being from Southeast Ohio and involved with Sojourner Truth. But Florence Ellenwood Allen was another one of the women that I talked about on one of the past dates.
Wow.
So, well, we're just about toward the end of our time, and I know that we want to promote again some more.
Yes, the International Women's Day Festival at
Yes.
Ohio University in Baker University Center Ballroom from 2 to 6. 2 to 5 are explicitly family-friendly hours, and there'll be an opportunity to watch performances and to engage with researchers and to play in the children's play area, and to really just have a wonderful outing.
Yes, you
Yeah.
mentioned the face painting,
Yep.
for instance,
Right.
which is going to be one of the features, but there are other things specifically for children. And there are vendors who will be
Yep.
selling jewelry, Girl Scout cookies.
Yeah, it's been a bit dangerous because I've been reviewing what people are wanting to bring, and so I think I'm
Oh.
going to be bringing too much pocket money with me.
Oh, dear.
So, yeah. So
Well, I'm
come
sure
prepared.
the vendors will be glad to see you coming, Geneva.
I'm sure that they will. So, I think I might be getting some new stuff over the weekend when the festival
yes,
comes.
when the festival
Yeah.
is there. And it's on the 4th floor of Baker Center in the ballroom.
Yeah, it's directly across from the Women's Center.
That's right,
Yeah.
and that's where you hang out.
That is where I hang out.
Yes,
Yeah.
right on the 4th floor.
Right.
The Women's Center has a lot of programming.
We do. We do. We offer opportunities for mentorship, and so I just wanted to kind of do a little plug for that because we're looking for community members
Right.
to help us serve as mentors for our undergraduate students on campus. So if they're interested,
Yes,
reach us.
they should reach out to the Women's Center. And what's the internet?
It's Women's Center, so it's www.ohio.edu and then /Women's Center.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you go to there, you can find out what's the latest at what's going on at the Women's Center.
Right. Right.
And I want to thank you very much. Dr. Geneva Murray is the director of the Women's Center on the 4th floor of Baker Center.
Thank you for
And
having me.
Thank you so much for coming and talking about this big event on March 13th, Sunday afternoon, 2 to 6, Baker Center Ballroom.
Yes. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. This is Lois Whaley for Women Today and Yesterday.